Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Elizabeth A. Cortu. I am founder and CEO of Nurse Exec Innovations, a career coaching and global health consulting brand created, designed specifically for nurse healthcare professionals and healthcare organizations. I am also the curator of Pass the Mic. Some of you are saying, what is Pass the Mic? Who is Pass Mike? Well, Pass the Mic is a platform curated for visionaries, advocates, and game changers looking to execute their footprint to global society into the areas of healthcare, business, technology, culture, and so much more. I am so honored to have these two powerhouse guests of mine here today on this broadcast. We are going to talk about Spotlight on mental health in America. Although we don't have more than 60 minutes to tackle everything on mental health in America, but we will entertain a wonderful, no judgment free zone conversation and real talk here on Pass the Mic. So, at my top right hand corner, I have Dr. Lois Greene. She is the powerhouse woman of Jersey. Yes, she is the director of the Human Experience Department of Health Equity and Strategic Integration Division. So that is, if you can wave hello to our audience, Dr. Lois Greene.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Elizabeth.
And some of you already have had the opportunity either to meet Dr. Wesley at the Nurse Exec Innovations Brunch back in 2019. You've also seen him on two other Pass the Mic events in 2020. And we welcome Dr. Wesley Willis, who is also known as the Nurse Doc, psychotherapist. He does it all. He is a man of many hats and so humble. And I am going to start the broadcast first of all to say I want to remember and honor my best friend who passed away 4 years ago, February 25th, 2018. I dedicate this broadcast to Delane Lucy Ellen, because without her inspiration, without her motivation, there would not be Nurse Exec Innovations brand. She was also a nurse. Her areas of expertise were mental health, maternal child health. She also was a medical concierge, business entrepreneur. So hence, I am dedicating this podcast to her because we have had a dialogue about the disparities that exist, especially in the African American, minority, Latino communities, male communities, and so much more. So without further ado, I am going to jump in, and I want to share with some of you that are watching this broadcast tonight. Excuse me. Those of you that are watching this broadcast tonight, there are 4 facts about mental health. Some of you are not even aware. Do you know that more than 43 million Americans struggle with mental? For our youth, 1 in 5 young people ages 13 to 18 will develop mental illness in their lifetime. Youth depression rates have risen from 6.9% to 8.6% since 2012. That was 10 years ago. And most Americans lack I'm going to repeat that 3 times. Most Americans lack access. Most Americans lack access to adequate mental health treatment. Without further ado, I'm going to jump into this broadcast with first of all, I would like if you could briefly introduce yourself, Ms. Dr. Greene and Dr. Wesley, for the audience to know what powerhouse we have here tonight and to recognize.
I don't want to take a lot of time introducing myself, but I do want to take some time to thank you for hosting this conversation. I think that if we spend the bulk of the time talking about how the impact and how we can help your audience, I think that would be amazing. But I am a nurse. I'm a registered nurse. My dissertation, I have a doctorate, and my dissertation was in how to keep people out of the hospital. Because there's just a group of people, they're called ambulatory care sensitive conditions, that end up being hospitalized unnecessarily. So I look at my life's mission on how to keep people out of the hospital and how to have them optimize their health as much as possible. So that's a little bit about who I am.
Dr. Wesley, you can share a brief introduction.
Yes, again, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for allowing me to come on and serve as a conversationalist on this show. I have a doctorate in psychology. I'm licensed as a clinical psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker, and also a registered nurse. I have an experience in critical care, and mental health are my passion. My work recently, later in my career, because I've almost been at this, I feel like, for almost 20 years, is now centered around mood disorders. But initially, my dissertation and work was the cardiogenic and long-term side effects of ADHD diagnoses and medications in Black and brown boys.
Awesome. Wow. Well, so excited to definitely have this very important discussion. But I want to open up briefly with the song because, as you know, through this pandemic, I have been really doing a lot of meditation, listening to a lot of music, and reading a lot of scripture. I want to inspire someone because music is a sense of history. So I'm just going to play this very briefly. It's not going to be the whole song.
One of the most difficult things to do is find yourself in a storm. Out in the storm, it seems like one who you thought you could count on is the way. Sometimes it seems like even God himself has forgotten about you. But in spite of that, to still be able to lift your hands and say, Lord, I trust you.
I can't feel your touch. I will trust you, Lord. I love you so much. My life's wasting alone. I feel so alone. Lord, my trust is in you. I surrender to you. So grateful now. And I wonder how I will make it through this time without trust.
Okay. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes,
So,
an amazing and powerful song.
Song by James Fortune, I Trust You. As you heard, many painful thoughts, and in the background, you may see there's my name is shame. Hello, my name is post-traumatic stress. Hello, my name is grief, depression. And so, first question I have to ask Dr. Greene, because both come from unique populations. You're in the heart of an urban medical
Absolutely.
center, and Wesley, you've been in the trenches during the pandemic, therapists, the whole nine. So it's going to be interesting to hear both of your individual responses. So how do you identify as common themes or triggers of mental illness in the population that you serve, Dr. Greene?
So interestingly, when you think of triggers, and I don't like to use that term, but let's just say A lot of the times when you see patients come in, there is something either external to them, meaning that something happened to them, right? They either were had some sort of an event or something external to them happened, and that can be a trigger. Sometimes you can have internal triggers, right? So I think about my own, relationship, and if I have had a childhood experience where I was abandoned, and then now I'm in a situation where I feel that trigger. So the feeling of abandonment can trigger something. Um, when a lot of times I work in a trauma center, and I can't tell you how often someone will come in and their behavior has been triggered by some trauma, whether it be violence or something that happened external to them, and they'll tell me when they come into the hospital. I had um, a woman the other day, and she had been in our trauma family room, and that's the room where you go and you tell a loved one that someone has passed away, and just the smell of that room, the look of that room was upsetting. And I've seen families destroy a room because they're triggered, to use that word. So there's lots of different things that happen. Sometimes it's symptomatic, and people don't even realize that, what, I'm a postmenopausal woman and my hormones are out of whack, and I don't realize why I am so irritated by
Mm,
people, or
mhm.
and it's internal to me, but not conscious to me. And there can be things where things are out of whack, and I love that we're having this conversation, because I don't think that if a person's blood sugar went down or up that we would begrudge them medication. But very often when a person has an imbalance mentally, there's a resistance to having them get stabilized. So there's lots of.
And I'm glad you shared that, and during this class about the trauma room, because especially for healthcare professionals, I always think about my experiences in trauma ICU. Would you believe this? These past two brought me back to what it looked like with 9/11.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it just took me all the way back to the
Hmm.
point where I had to reach out to Wesley and say, I'm having a hard time. And he gave me, I call it passport. And he
Yeah.
said, Liz, and I'm gonna say this publicly, he said, Liz, he said, many healthcare professionals have a therapist. I'm like, what? He was like,
Oh,
yeah. And
absolutely.
I'm like, so you mean I could get a therapist? So he was like,
Mhm.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
So I was like, I need a
Mm,
therapist,
yeah.
because it was just, as you mentioned, it could be what. So what would be the apropos word to use if it's not trigger? Is there a particular preferred word?
Experience. I don't know. I'm not sure
Okay, okay.
what's better
I
for
like,
it.
I like. Okay, I'm gonna make go French.
Mhm.
D'experience. Experience. So the experience for
Yeah.
me was that I was dealing with not only the experience with that being trauma, being a black woman who's trying to honor the African culture, honor the Haitian culture, honor myself as an American born here, honor, the being a mother of twins, losing my identity, levels to it. So,
Yes.
and and I appreciate you sharing that. So the question to you, Dr. Willis Wesley, what
Mhm.
are some themes that you've identified?
And so the great thing about my work is, I do all private practice at this point. I no longer work like in clinics and different stuff, and my postdoctorate work has now been in cognitive as a cognitive behavioral therapist. So a lot of my work centers around questioning, even centers around. Can you tell me about the recent unwanted feelings that you've been having, that you've been experiencing? Because just like just like she said, triggers is can mean so many different things to so many different people. So yes, so that's kind of like where I start with. And as a cognitive behavioral therapist, again, what particular schemas, things continue to show up in your life that don't make you feel ways that you would like to continue to feel? whether that be again frustration, whether it, again be anxiety, and those kind of like it's kind of like what we build upon in the work.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. So the topic today is basically called How Are You Feeling Today? So, we all are healthcare professionals, and we drill it back down to basic 101 nursing. We were taught about open ended questions, closed ended questions. Are there any particular open ended questions you utilize to gather more information? Especially, for the most part, we know our colleagues, we know, our administrators that we work with, we know what behaviors look like day in, day out. But if you see someone exhibiting signs of anxiety, depression, grieving.
Mhm.
Lord only knows how much loss has been over the past year, and then even before that. And thoughts of suicide. Any thoughts? Because before you answer that, just share with you. I went to a particular store. I'm not going to call the name, but I went to a store, and a young lady was saying a lot of very, very hurtful words, very angry. And she even had, like, the laser gun that you use to scan the items,
Mhm.
pointing it at her colleague's head several
Mm.
times. I was like, something, in my spirit, I was like, oh, let's just get the boxes and go. But something in my spirit said, no, something more, dive deeper. Long story short, I had a conversation with her. She even said, "Oh, your card declined." I was like, I checked my account before I shopped. My account. I said, "Are you?" I looked at her. I said, "Are you okay? Is there something wrong?" What turned out to be in her situation, she was homeless, but she was working, and she was living in her car behind the movie. So I go back to say, what are some of the open-ended questions that you would ask, Doctor? What are your thoughts?
So, just like we talked at the very beginning, with Dr. Green said, I love the fact that SAMHSA came out several years ago with trying to train us as individuals and with trauma informed care, and not leading with the question, what's wrong with you, but tell me about your experience, as a way of getting to not triggering the person, one, and then not making it wrong what your experience was.
Exactly.
So again,
Say that again.
like I said,
Say that again, because a lot of
mhm,
people need to hear it. You said making sure that they're not say it wrong. Repeat that.
right, exactly. Because again, what happened to you? Being the question that I asked is like, a lot of like, I remember the very, I've been a nurse for quite some time, for almost over 20 years. And I remember when that paper chart said, when you working in the emergency room, what's wrong with you today? What's your
Mm,
chief complaint?
Right.
I don't want to know anything else about you. Basically, what's your chief
mm,
complaint?
Right.
mm.
We want to work on the main problem, no matter what
Right.
we're seeing. But I
And
think.
and I love the fact that we're slowly moving away from that as a way of, as a norm, as a
Mhm.
cultural norm in the
Mhm.
medical profession. But I do find myself again utilizing that, not just for myself, but even when I help friends or talk with friends about how they can be emotionally supportive without closing other people off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think if we give your audience any information today, I think it's really important because your question was, what questions do we ask to gather information? I think it's important that audiences know that mental health has mental professionals, right? That
Yes.
if someone is exhibiting signs and symptoms of being anxious, being depressed, in the hospital, very often we'll ask very succinctly, do you have a plan? If you
Mm.
have jumped out of a window and then you come to the hospital and you say, oh, I don't want to hurt myself. Guess what? That trumps everything because you just took an action that told me you are definitely wanting to harm yourself.
Yeah.
So, but then we just ask the question. We're very direct, and very often people will tell the truth. I don't want to be here anymore. At that point, I have to realize as a nurse, and I appreciate professionals like Dr. Willis, that I need to get them to a professional. If they broke their bone, I'm not going to try to fake the funk and put their bones back together. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. We need to get people that are in pain to professionals in order for them to get the treatment. And you have to understand that the mindset that they're in is their reality. So we can't talk about it, girl. In our community, we're like, girl, you'll be fine. Just,
Yeah.
take a drink, medicate yourself, do
Yes.
something, you'll be better in a little bit. We got to stop doing that. We have
Yeah.
to recognize, if we have a problem with our tooth, we're going to a dentist. We're not
Yeah.
going to. So recognize that the profession exists and that it can help people to a better state. Mental health is just like physical health. We
Yeah.
can get better. I
Yeah.
really want to have people understand these professionals are well trained and,
Yeah.
and will be a part of. And I loved your analogy at the beginning, the storm, right? And if you recognize that it's a storm, one of the great things about a storm is that you kind of in the back of your mind know that it is going to be over, right? So even just that mindset that this is something that I'm going through. It may be very dark. It may look devastating at parts of the storm, but
Yeah.
it's cleansing. It has a purpose, So
Yes.
what you're going through is for you, not to you. And there's help along the way. Is what I would say.
Exactly. Thank
Right.
you. I love the fact that you said that there are professionals and
Yes.
you have to treat it just like you would if you had a physical symptom. So thank you. And Wesley, Dr. Wesley Willis.
Yes, I mean, Dr. Green, something you said. Again, like when I'm evaluating a suicidal patient, what's your sense of hope? Do you have a sense of hope? What's your ability to see things outside of yourself in this moment? And if they say that doesn't exist, then that triggers a
Then
whole nother cascade of conversation topics. Like again, do you have a plan? And when people have a plan, like, hey, I have access to a gun, I have a clear plan, or I've done it in the past, it's really clear that we can't have a contract for safety, but we need to escalate this further. Again, expressed feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness are all like red flags
yeah.
for me as a therapist, that I can say, you know what? Hey, this is experience. This is their experience, and this is more than that can get tackled in 45 minutes to an hour. And
Mhm.
let me escalate this to the next level.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you so much. And then, so now we talked about escalating. That's going to lead into the next question that I have is that have you either or? I know I've been in situations where like this doesn't sound right, feel right, look right. Um, I'm going to act on it. Like you said, if they have a full-fledged plan, there's red flag. There's the song by it says "Ring the Alarm." If there's full-fledged red flags, time to really sound the alarm, meaning calling for help.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Mhm.
Dr. Green. I'm going to highlight. You said if somebody has a broken bone, they're not going to go to a dentist for that broken
Yeah.
bone. And
Yeah.
if somebody has a toothache, they're not going to go to an orthopedic surgeon to fix it. So same thing with mental health. We need to take care of our health. So in regards to certain circumstances that have arisen, have you ever been in a situation where you had to, can you share with the audience what would be an example of where you had to call a crisis?
Sure. So I work in a hospital, and so very often patients will, you're taking care of them, and they think that they'll be very comfortable, and they're like, you know what, I just don't want to be here anymore. This is a conversation that anybody could hear. And so part of my responsibility as an administrator is to teach folks, if someone has communicated to you that they want to harm themselves or others, that's not something that you can just walk out of the room and, ignore. That you need to get them help. And if you're not in a hospital setting and you're observing a friend, and whether it's they're talking about, hinting about it, threatening suicide, they're just doing behaviors that are just really odd for them, you really want to get alongside that person and get them to help. And sometimes it's not. It might be calling 911. It might be calling a crisis team. But yes, I have absolutely have had situations where someone has communicated to me they want to harm themselves or they want to harm others, and gotten them to professionals.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and so most of my experience, all pretty much all of my experience has been in outpatient and several years in inpatient settings. Had a I had a client who had kind of like expressed
Mhm.
inappropriate feelings towards me, and I knew that, but I did not know this particular day the client had chosen to follow me and
Mm.
express these feelings outside of the clinical setting. And when I therapeutically had reiterated kind of like my feelings and that that this was not welcome, they basically stated that they would stab me.
Mm.
And that was something that I chose and then I had that client hospitalized like on the spot at the closest hospital. I've been fortunate to have sometimes admitting privileges where I have had to have patients emergently admitted into the hospital psychiatrically for 24 to 72 hours. Um, but yes, that was the most significant one that stood
Yeah.
out for me when you sent me
Mm.
that question. I actually even, for myself, like again, I have my own therapist. I've had my own therapist for years. Had to something that I had to process, what that was like to, in my line of work, I had never kind of imagined, getting to that point. I thought I would knew the signs and the triggers, which is so why it's so, I feel like it's so important for us as healthcare professionals to be in spaces and with professionals who we can talk about what we're going through and how we're experiencing this. This isn't a thing you can have to deal with by yourself.
No.
Right. Right. Yeah. And even now in the telehealth world, where we've had patients that have expressed, to a provider that they wanted to end their life, and they're in their home, we had to send the authorities and get them help. So it's, it's our duty as health professionals certainly to do no harm.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so vital and important. And once again, I'm gonna highlight our healthcare professionals, especially there we have a lot of seasoned nurses, but we also have some newer nurses that came into this profession just when the pandemic broke.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, I've gotten a lot of that reached out for coaching and what should I do? How should I do? How can I get past this? All the deaths and one of the things I remember when I worked in trauma ICU, we had a lot of sessions where we debriefed after each
Yeah.
event.
Yep.
So important. So I'm moving on to the next question in
Yeah.
regards to, because both of you belong to a number of organizations, fraternal, a sorority. Dr. Greene belonged to my nursing sorority, Phi sorority, Tall Chi chapter of Somerset, New Jersey. Shout out to them. And
That's it.
Dr. Wesley Willis is a member of Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, and various, and both of you are in various other organizations highlighting the fraternal. But my next question leads into how can other how can families, number one, families, employees, educational systems, churches, and other civic organizations improve awareness in regards to access, offer support? Because as I mentioned in the beginning of the broadcast, lack of access. How can we educate our families, our churches, all of those listed below to improve access and offer support?
You wanna go first, Doc?
Yeah, I'll definitely start. I mean, I think that by really talking the talk and walking the walk, it's one thing to say I'm really invested and I want to see the well-being of my particular community. It's another thing to go out and search for it. In the state of New York, the communities. One of the resources that I love the most is the Community Service Society of New York. As a licensed clinical social worker who used to work in a hospital setting, I cannot tell you how invaluable these numbers of trainings that they do for the community, for people who say they want to go out and like really be a part. And I all too often these trainings are empty. Nobody shows up. And this information is right online. You can go right there. So I mean, I think that it's one thing to again to just say it, but to really kind of go out and do it. I think next is recognizing that we all have a role to play. One of my favorite initiatives is a National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities, where were trained in mental health first aid. And I mean, it's right on their website. Actually, I'm going to bring it up just so you can take a look, and it will show you. I mean, this is information right all online. You know, you could just go to the National Institute on Minority Health and Health
Yeah.
Disparities
What's it called?
is
Can you type into the chat? I'm sorry.
what's that? I'm sorry.
What's the name? What's the name of the
So yeah, so the it's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities, and they talk about kind of like their barbershop initiative, where barbers are trained in mental health first aid. And we'll talk about another narrative in a later question. But again, it talks about how barbers and how hairstylists who we all go to, right? Let's be honest, in our community, they a person may not come to see me, you know, and feel so openly sharing some sensitive information, but they will share that with their barber. And barbers can be our first line of defense. And this is free training. Like, so again, I love the fact that it's out there. So this stuff is out there. It's not hidden. It's not a big secret. Again, Community Service Society of New York have been around for over almost 100 years. Uh, it's really truly about seeking it out. We have the World Wide Web. We have the internet. We have things that we can Google search. You can go to YouTube and watch the funny stuff. You can go to YouTube and watch the same information. These people, these organizations have very few followers. So it's not hidden and tucked away information.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a real quick question before I move to
Mhm.
Dr. Green? What about I've gotten calls, friends, family. I don't have health insurance. I don't
Mhm.
have the ability to pay out of pocket 150, 175. Is there any particular site that comes to mind, or do they, recommend, I'm just wondering if there's anything out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just speak to, just New York, but the New York is the area where I know
Yeah.
the resources the most. I think that if people get involved with know your local social worker. Social workers have their kind of like hands on the pulse of kind of like community services. I mean, I used to work at a mental health clinic that would charge people $10, for work, for therapy. And yes, of course, a lot of a lot of times it wasn't like 20-year therapists in these clinics, but I was one working in that clinic under someone who had 20 years of experience, who was my supervisor, who was helping me become a more experienced therapist. So there are all types of resources out there for individuals who want to actually truly get the help.
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Green.
Sure. No, so I absolutely agree. I think education, if organizations, employers, systems are looking on how to help, they can help normalize the conversation, right? I think a lot of times people with mental illness really feel judged and feel like they're not able to share, but just normalizing the conversation. Like I said, if the person was diabetic and needed insulin, there's no like, stigma attached to that. It's just they need that in order to live. We need to listen. I think these organizations need to hear what the problems are and do what they can to try to bring solutions. We often have, like this is February, so it's Heart Awareness Month. There's a lot of information. There's mental health awareness times, and we need to as vigorously embrace that those times so that we can again normalize the conversation. Encourage people to say, you know what, okay, you're crazy. I've got challenges as well. I have a counselor. I have, it's not. I have a dentist. I have a cardiologist. I have a therapist. It's like I'm going to take care of me and normalize the conversation.
Yes, I love. I'm taking copious mental notes, but I'm loving both of you. The words you're using. The experience, and the normalizing the normalization. Because once Wesley gave me the power and normalization that, all healthcare professionals, most of them have it.
You better, if you want to survive, you can't take better care of other people.
Exactly.
It's almost like it's almost like getting dressed with an accessory. I felt like I could put on my necklace. I have a therapist. I have a hairstylist. I have a makeup artist. Why would you have a therapist?
Yeah.
I wanted to address Dr. Randa Nicholas, one of my nursing colleagues. She mentioned, she said, access is a big thing. The help is there. The road to getting help is often paved with barrier. Often it's financial. The country has to do a better job at not just making mental health care accessible, but affordable. Mm-hmm. True. So true. Any thoughts?
And we also have to, as a country, value what healthcare brings, right? So I know there are people who will pay $2,000 for a pair of shoes, but not want to invest that money in their mind or in their personal well-being. And that's not a judgment, just recognizing that we don't, as a society, embrace opportunities to be as healthy as possible. And we can do that. We can do better with that.
Yes. I agree. And Wesley, any parting thoughts before I move on?
I think we've definitely made a start by trying to create some parity. I've gone from doing this particular type of work when some health insurances didn't even offer mental health as a coverage for clients and for patients, to now sometimes they offer it very much. They offer it at a very minimal reimbursement, and the reality is we have to keep our practices open to do the work that we do. And like Dr. Greene said, we also have to talk about the value. People that will go out in not judgment, but how much is your mental health? How much is it worth to you? Does it hold the same value as those Jordans or those Jimmy Choos?
Exactly. So what would be 4 steps, Dr. Greene, that you would identify as vital for a person to maintain their positive mental well-being?
I think you have to look at yourself like an investment. I think that it's important. And the 4 things that I came up with it, I think purpose. A person that doesn't understand their purpose or why they're here and what they're here to do, I think it's vital to maintaining well-being. Otherwise, you can just be off. I think gratitude is important. I said joy and connection, right? I think that we're here to live life and enjoy it. And so many people are sort of walking through life trying not to die, when we really are here to find out what is it that you enjoy and how can you live better, not just, keep from dying. So, and connection is important. I think my research really showed that, when people are alone, people think that, I can just do it by myself. But there's an African proverb that says, sticks in a bundle can't be broken. And, when we're just a twig by ourselves, it's much, much harder to survive and thrive. And community is a really important thing, not to only get from, but to give to.
Yes, thank you so
much.
Wow, strong, powerful nuggets. Wesley?
So 4 key things that kind of like are like my antennas are attuned to. First and foremost is sleep. I can't tell you
Mhm.
how many times I've talked to patients, and sleep deprivation is probably one of the first culprits in undermining an individual's mental health.
Yeah.
If you I mean, I'm not saying yes that we all have to get 8 hours of sleep, but our body is meant to
Mhm.
have rest, our mind is meant to have rest. And so I am very attuned to, because I am a mental health and a physical health practitioner. I get to try to, like, I remember just how important that can be, from working in ICUs when
Mhm.
patients with ICU delirium, because the bells have been going on all night and they
Mhm.
couldn't even get sound sleep, and now they are floridly psychotic and needing Seroquel and Trazodone and Depakote, Liz, as you know. So first and foremost is sleep. Secondly, behavioral activation is very important in maintaining positive mental well-being. Getting up, getting out, being involved, being engaged is what is meant by kind of behavioral activation. No, I'm not telling you that you have to go run on a treadmill and release those endorphins, but what I am telling you is that you have to get up. Is that you have to get up and you have to do something, whether that something being cooking. Like for myself, cooking for me is my self-care. It makes me feel good to be able to nourish my body. And again, that's behavioral activation. When I'm feeling like, wow, stressed and overwhelmed, I get up and I cook. That's just kind of like how things go. Things
Dr.
that
Willis, I want to
uh
give you my address.
uh
You've been
things
doing
that
a lot of great.
like
You've been doing a lot of great things, Chef Wesley.
things one thing that Dr. Green said is that, like, for me, cooking is my sense of community. It reminds me of my life with my grandmother, you know and she's no longer here, and that makes me feel good. That gets me out of kind of like those stressful days.
Mhm.
And thirdly, I put down being more present focused. When people are focused on the past, it's I mean, we don't think about the past. I can't tell you, it's 85% of the people I see, if we talk about the past, it's riddled with with regret. It's
Mm.
rarely ever like, oh, Doc, let me tell you, about these great decisions that I've made in life. It's often comes as a complaint that I met the wrong man. I keep meeting the wrong men. Well, let's talk about the experience of, you having this experience, as opposed to the past of regret and issues,
Yeah.
and also the being focused on the future. How many of us sit and think about the future with a sense of calmness? No, we have a sense of anxiousness and angst about it. Like,
You
what's
say
tomorrow
that,
gonna bring?
and you say that again, because I struggled. I'll be honest with you. That's where I really struggled, because I'm a futurist, a visionary, and these past 2 years, it was
Hmm.
like, what are we?
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, what's gonna happen?
Hmm.
When is it gonna happen?
And when is it going to happen? And then doctor, when you have your wonderful children, all of them are grown. Me, when my boys were born, I envisioned what that was like: prom, graduation. Well, for me, the reality was we didn't know if they were even going to graduate
Yeah.
in person. It was a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
burden of, though I call it, it's not the burden, but let me take my words. The strong warriors, they always say, check on your strong warriors, check on the strong ones.
Hmm. Check on your strong friends.
You
Exactly.
know, it was the constant. So I say all to say thank you for mentioning about the importance of forward. Even though we're in this
Hmm.
pandemic, there we have something to look forward to.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think, like I said, being focused on the present. And another thing Dr. Green says that I think can help you, like, remain in the present is, again, the use of meditation. And while when we get caught up in that idea, what's around the corner? How am I going to be ready? Is the ability to say, I have everything that God has given me all the tools to deal with whatever may come, and that is good enough. to be in the present as opposed to trying to head off these things. Well, I want to be a doctorate and I want to get that done. Yes, ambition is necessary. Ambition is useful, but being caught up in a sense of where it ruminates in your head and you can't even think about anything else and you can't focus on where you are and be happy where you are
Yeah.
right now is some very key is just a very bad trajectory for maintaining a positive and healthy a mental state.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Green, what mental health um, myth would you like to spell here tonight
Uh,
in regards to culture, whichever? What are your thoughts?
sure. I think when people see symptoms of depression, people kind of say, "Oh, they just have the blues. That's going to pass," and not recognizing that if someone's not getting dressed, not getting up out of bed, not constantly sleeping. So there's enough sleep, and then there's just oversleeping. I watch the show Hoarders, and I feel like it's almost an exploitation of people who have a mental illness, but we're looking at them as if it's about the things, and it's not. These are
Mm,
symptoms, and we need to recognize symptoms and maybe
mhm.
question and try to get the person to help. That's one myth. Sometimes there's a myth that says, there's faith organizations that will tell someone, "Oh, you just need to sit here and let somebody pray for you, and we can pray away that mental." I'm telling you, and it's so hurtful because prayer is a real and it's a powerful thing, but you don't
Yes.
they don't have the same conversation about diabetes or your broken leg. Don't get to that surgeon, we'll just pray that leg straight. We don't do that, and we do that with mental illness, that we can just pray things away and not recognize the need for a healer or someone who's a professional. I think another myth is about Black women, and that we don't get depressed, that we're super women. I would like every Black woman to get rid of that cape. We don't have to have a cape. We're not super women. We're human beings. So it's a myth. It's like, that I can bring home the bacon. No. I want Dr. Willis to cook my bacon. No, it's too much. We just need to be able to live life and enjoy it and not think that we have to be super women in order to be here, right? Or the other myth is that, Black folks don't commit suicide. We don't do that. That's not a Black thing. That's a white thing. I'm sorry. We might drink ourselves to death. We might use drugs until we die, but we absolutely, I want to say it is looking at the Center for Disease Control, but Black women have a higher incidence of having suicidal thoughts due to racial and gender bias. So there's lots of statistics around the fact that yes, Black people commit suicide. And then the last myth is that therapy, that's for white people. We don't go to therapy.
Yes.
That's we go to church. We deal with ourselves, but we don't even recognize and acknowledge that there's room in our lives for mental health professionals.
Yeah. Wow. You. High five. Same question to you, Dr. Willis. What are your
Yeah, Dr. Green, thank you so
myths?
much for offering up so many, just myth breakers that have just become so commonly part of our narrative that people just regurgitate them.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not true. That Black people don't commit suicide. That's so not true. Why would you say that? I think that one of the things that I thought of is the idea that men don't do therapy.
Mm.
Uh, I think I'm so tired of hearing that narrative. I can't tell you the number of places that I'm in, and I'm like, that's not my experience at all. 75% of my really full practice are men who openly said, I need to talk with something, and something is going on about me. I think that, yes, what really is true is that men are very selective about who they open up to. And that is the reality.
Yeah.
And as something says, they said less than 5% of mental health therapists and mental health practitioners are people of color. I think only 1% of that, and I'm not sure of the statistic, are African American or men of color.
Yes.
So just call it what it is. We've seen so much literature that says when an individual, when a practitioner that looks like their patient, talks like their patient, they connect more, they tend to do better.
Yeah.
Culturally congruent care is what we call it. And if we can really put more focus into that, I think we would see more people, more men getting help, as opposed to saying men don't do therapy. No, men want to feel like they're understood and they're heard.
Understood. Yes. And I also wanted to reiterate, many of us have a lot of circles of vision. It's just taking that first step of asking, asking for help, boxing, text on the side, say, I need help. And one of the
Mhm,
things, I'll be honest, for myself, I was always so used to relying, no one can do anything. Says, I need you to survive. We all need each other, right?
mhm,
The only child, when I looked to my left, looked to my right, it was always me to figure it out, to bounce to this, that, and the other. So one of the biggest things that I used to struggle with was asking for help.
mhm,
Like you said, with the superwoman syndrome. And it's funny
Yeah.
because
Rid of the cape.
seven years ago, I took that picture not because I felt that I was superwoman. It's because I felt that was a cape that needs to be relinquished for
Mm.
all. So it is okay to ask for help. It's okay to, can I say this to my folks? I my background, culture, actually African and Haitian. They were like, don't cry.
Mm.
Have to cry. It's
mhm,
healthy. It's
Yeah.
healthy. Don't scream. I remember there was a situation where Brenda, she's watching. I was like, girl, I want to scream. She said, scream. I was like, well, I can't. I'm in Staples right now. But I'll scream when I get in the car. So whatever it is, just do it and get some help. So my last question is, final question to Dr. Greene.
Mhm.
Um, what are some of your tools and strategies? Optimism. We're going to use the word, I'm going to repeat that. Optimism. We talked about focus forward. The only way we can focus forward and move to the future is have optimism. So, what optimism tools and strategies would you utilize to share with our audience tonight and those that will get the replay? How to move through this
Sure.
pandemic? Because I love what you said to me last night, even though I was meditating. She was like, "Are you sleeping?" I was like, "No, I'm just really in a deep zone. I'm meditating." So she said, "Well, the numbers are going down, the pandemic." So some thoughts. I'm looking forward to
Sure.
what you have to say.
So this is personal for me because as we went through the pandemic, I remember the first couple of days when we were driving into the hospital, and literally there was nobody else on the road because everybody else was going away, and so it was traumatic. But I found that I had to really watch what I fed my mind, because your mind is your truth, right? So if I'm thinking that, you know, the world is coming to an end and I'm going to just drink wine and have carrot cake every day because it's over, I had to be really, really, I had to really guard my mind. So I didn't watch murders. I didn't watch anything that was going to not give me a sense of hope or a sense of optimism or joy. So I had to be intentional about what I was reading, what I was looking at. I loved TikTok during that time because there were some hilarious creators on that app, and I would absolutely laugh when I would come home because there was nothing else to do. But intentionally looking for joy and laughter. Exercise was like a staple. Once I got on the bike and I would go to Liberty and just ride, and I wanted to just burn up like all the anxiety and the challenges of the day, and
Yeah.
that was immensely just a benefit to me, and I wouldn't want to miss it because I think I understand scream therapy because at times I didn't want to scream, but just getting it out, burning up that energy and
Yes.
getting those endorphins, it
Yes.
was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I took yoga. I think is important, breathing and recognizing how to connect to your breath, right? So
Yes.
meditation, breathing.
Yes.
Um, the doctor mentioned mindfulness and how to stay present. I have a really challenging time not thinking about what I've done or what I want to do because I have a lot, I'm visionary as well. But just try to stay present. Enjoy what I have right now. My family was well. I had so much to be grateful for.
Yeah.
So mindfulness and gratitude, and then where I could, I love just hugs. Just
Yeah.
being able to, hug on somebody and connect the DNA. So those were my
Thank you.
sort of pandemic.
I wanted to mention Dr. Layla Kabid said yes. That was earlier. She was talking to you.
Yes.
And I wanted to add this before Wesley chimes in. Dr. Nicholas Randa says, thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you, Liz, for hosting this talk. These conversations are critical. I wish more people tuned in. Great conversation. Thanks for your major contribution to the profession. So I wanted to give you that feedback. Okay, so Wesley, I can't hear yours because yours.
No, I first and foremost, Dr. Green, I can't tell you, as a cognitive behavioral therapist, one of the things that my patients always must do when they enter into this particular type of work, number one is develop a sense of gratitude,
Yeah.
for some of the smallest things. And it
Every.
doesn't, you have to be, that I have, this nice car, this nice job. Sometimes God woke me up this morning, and that's start with some of the basic foundations. So developing a sense of gratitude, utilizing that every day. When patients turn in their homework every week, because as a CBT person, when patients become very established in the work, that's what's the gratitude for the week. Let's start there, and then we'll go the other places.
Yes.
So that's number one. Also, a sense of affirmations. What
Yeah.
are the messages that I tell myself? Not what people are telling me, but what I feed myself. Feed myself words of inspiration. Again, like I said earlier, that I have all the tools and the expertise, experience that God has said that I need to be successful, to make it through this day, to deal with that storm when that
Yeah.
storm comes, to get through that storm into the next phase of my life. Um, so gratitude, affirmations, and mindfulness. It's so like again, tuning in to your body, recognizing like when you like, you know what? I'm not checked in. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was going and going and going, and I would be in sessions, and my eyes would like tear up, and it wasn't because I was emotional, but I had started depriving myself of sleep. I was doing notes at night, doing progress notes at 12 o'clock, submitting bills, and I was tired. I
Yeah.
honestly was tired, and I
Yeah.
had stopped checking in with my own body because I had started putting other things important. And just like, I love the slogan that everybody is now using, like self-care is not selfish. I
Yes.
need to take care of myself to be present. And that's not just for therapists. That's not just for nurses. That's for your mother. That's for your
Yeah.
grandmother. That's for your grandfather.
Everyone.
You know, so yeah, those are my tips.
Well, thank you so much. And I conclude with this last comment. This is from Randa has a lot to say. Thank you, Randa. Dr. Nicholas says, thank you both you, Dr. Green and Dr. Willis, for your expertise contribution to the profession. These conversations are critical and we need more. Folks need to feel okay just talking about mental health. Thanks, Liz, for hosting this podcast. So I have to say thank you so much once again to Dr. Green and Dr. Wesley Willis. To Dr. Green, I remember when you posted something back in December in regards to the American Nurses Association, healthy initiatives and things like that. That's what my desire to focus forward and have this conversation. I really look forward to having, many more conversations on different other areas of mental health. But I want to say, an attitude of gratitude. Here we are 2 years later. I am fully walking because some of you that weren't aware, I actually developed COVID before we even knew it was COVID. That was
Wow.
2020. So I was actually discharged with a walker, a cane, and I was wearing a brace. I'm fully rehabilitated. I'm playing tennis again. I'm walking in the park, counting ducks, mindful practice, and definitely meditating. Because as a visionary, like you said, my brain would be overwired, so I had to learn how to take breath, inhale, exhale. So I thank you so much to both of you. My name is Elizabeth A. Courtshue. I am the founder, CEO of Nurse Executive Innovations. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Feel free to follow both Dr. Greene and Dr. Wesley Willis. And thank you so much. Have a great evening. God
Thank you,
bless.
Elizabeth.
Good night.
Thank you, Elizabeth.